السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We will be talking, inshallah, about the Paycheck Protection Program and how to make sure that it will be forgiven once we receive the funds. But till people begin to come to this webinar, I just would like to remind everybody of the beauty of Ramadan, the fact that we are given this opportunity once a year to elevate our iman, to try to have our sins forgiven. As the Prophet ﷺ tells us, من صام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. Meaning that if you were to fast Ramadan with believing in its the sanctity of it, in the importance of it, in the fact that you are worshiping the Almighty God and hoping for a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises to forgive everybody's sin who does that. Let me begin by talking about, I am as executive director of NAIT. I feel obligated to at least talk about NAIT a little bit. NAIT is a Waqf organization that was started in 1973 to protect the properties of Islamic centers or Islamic organizations. And alhamdulillah, at this point, we have approximately 260 centers under the Waqf program, with almost over 400 properties also under the protection of the Waqf program. We have a number of services. We've had a number of services during the years. Early in the 1980s, when Islamic books were not available, we made sure that we had the ATP, which basically produced Islamic books and translated Islamic books from Arabic into English to make it available to Islamic centers and to the Muslim community. And then when we didn't have the distribution channels ready at the time, we actually established the Islamic book service. And then, once that need was satisfied, we walked away from it, because our purpose is to try to make sure that the Muslim community is well served. We also call the Islamic Centers Cooperative Fund, where abbreviated ICCF, and the ICCF is really a way to allow Islamic centers to invest their excess funds or their endowments without risking the principal or any accumulated earnings that may come up. Meaning, we have a takaful concept that protects the principal, and we do that by having a reserve from earnings that will not allow the principal or the accumulated earnings to decline. As you can see, the volatility of the equity market now, and it's really very reassuring to those people who with ICCF accounts that they will, they know their funds are secure and they will not be declining as the market declines. Let me begin now by talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. Most of the people who have already applied should have received the funds. Now, once you receive the funds, you need to be able to use those funds in a manner that meets the terms and conditions set by the SBA and the bank. It's very important to follow the details of how to do it, to make sure that when you apply for forgiveness, you will be forgiven. Now, one thing that we need to begin to, when you applied for the loan, you certified to the SBA and to basically the federal government that current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operation of your application, meaning that you needed those funds in order for you to continue your operating your business or your not-for-profit organization. So it's important that certification now you will have to actually, when it's time to submit the application for forgiveness, you need to make sure that you actually verify the need for such a loan. Now, things we need to know about this PPP. If the funds that you receive, from the PPP loan is used for the purposes for which you applied for, which means that you have to apply at least 75% of that money has to be used for the purpose of payroll. Now, payroll is, we have to understand what payroll means. Payroll means salaries, wages, cash tips, payment for regular leaves of absence, payments for sick pay, separation fee, compensations, group health insurance, all of that, retirement benefits, meaning that if you have a retirement benefits, some not-for-profit organizations basically match, say, 3 to 4% or 5% to an IRA. So you have to make sure that you pay this amount. You have to make sure that you pay this amount during those 8 weeks in which you have a window. The minute you get the funds from the PPP loan, you have 8 weeks to basically spend that money, and you need to spend it in a manner that is consistent with the application. So all of those issues, all of those payments have to be made in accordance to what you've stated initially in your application. As I said before, you have 8 weeks in which to spend this money and to make sure that it's spent in a manner that is consistent with the terms of the application. Now, if you have employees, you need to make sure that you pay them their regular pay. Do not pay them less than 75% of what they used to receive prior to February 15th. Meaning that do not go and reduce their pay, and then, because if you reduce their pay, they will also reduce the amount of the loan that will be forgiven accordingly. So you need to make sure that you do that. Now, you also have to make sure, for some people you need to also maintain all your employees. Now, if you have furloughed or terminated some employees, you can get them back as long as you do it by June 30th. As long as you do it by June 30th. They will allow you to at least get the credit for payments to those employees. Now, it's also, some companies or some outfits may have a lot of part-time employees. So you have to actually convert that into what we call full-time equivalent employee. How do you do that? So if you have 3 or 4 people who are working and they're working 20 hours a week, so you basically divide the number of hours, the total number of hours, by 40, and that gives you a weekly equivalent, an employee, a full-time equivalent employee. Now you can spend also, when you applied for the loan, if you know what the calculation that you've made, you basically made a calculation based on the average salaries and wages that you paid during the year, and then you multiplied it by 2.5%, which means that half a percent that they gave you they give it to you to pay for mortgage payments, for rental, for utilities. So if you have those expenses, what you need to make sure is that any interest or any rental or anything that you were already committed to it prior to February 15th. You mean that you cannot begin a rent, you start paying yourself a rent, somebody else a rental expense that you did not pay in the prior year. You cannot have, if you have an interest, any interest that is applicable to machinery or leases or whatever, all of that would fall within that 25% that they allow you to pay. But that 25%, you have to understand, it's always compared to the payroll. So your payroll has to be 75%, or the proceeds from your loan, 75% of which must be used for payroll and payroll expenses. And I said payroll expenses, let's repeat one more time. It's basically the wages, the salaries, health insurance, sick pay, severance pay, all of those issues, all of those items are considered part of the payroll. Subcontractors who are being paid by a 1099 are not part of the payroll. So you need to make sure that you know what the payroll encompasses when we use the word payroll. One thing that you have to understand is that once you apply for the loan forgiveness program, you need to provide a lot of documents. You need to, first of all, make the certification that you actually needed the funds, and the funds were needed for you to continue operations. That's one. Secondly, you need to make sure that you have all the documents that are supportive of the expenditures that you've made within those 8 weeks. 941s will be important. Any payments to your for rental expenses, you have to provide. You have to provide the lease for that. If you have an interest payments on equipment or otherwise, you have to provide the proof, and you have to provide the payments and potentially cancel checks. The 941 is, and they may even ask you for canceled checks too. Now, timing is everything. So you have basically 8 weeks in order to spend this money. So if you have to make adjustment onto your payroll dates to make sure that the payments are made within, because an example, if the payment for the 8th week or the 6th and 7th week or 7th or 8th week are to be made, say, June 1st, but you got your money on April 30th, you would want to advance it by 2 days and make sure that the payment is made during that 8 weeks period, so that you would qualify those funds for forgiveness. Those are issues, it's minor issues, but if you don't pay attention to it, it can catch up with you and could disqualify a lot of funds from being forgiven for your organization. What happens is that if you were to apply for forgiveness and basically the bank or SBA refuses to forgive those loans, you basically have the right to basically pay off the money, and you have the right to pay it as soon. Prepayment is not, there's no penalty for that, so you can prepay. You can also appeal. But I don't know if the appeal is going to be successful. We don't know what the guidelines for that, but you can always appeal, and if it doesn't appeal, at least you can pay. Of course, they allow you 2 years to pay it, and they charge you 1%, for interest during that time period. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. I thank you for taking the time to listen to us.
So yeah, thank you very much, Brother Salah Obeidallah. That was a really awesome presentation, and it was really informative. So there is a question: one center and a school, they are operated under the same tax ID, and they have different bank accounts though. The question is that should they issue the payroll from the center ID, or should the school continue to do whatever they are doing right now, different bank accounts, and they're doing payroll?
Yeah, if they applied only for one loan, whatever the name that they use for that loan, if they use the school as the name plus the account, then they should be using that school. If they use the center as the main account, then they should continue to use the center and do it accordingly. Go ahead.
And when does the 8-week window start?
The 8 weeks window start the minute you receive the funds from the SBA, the minute you receive it. So if you receive it on May 1st, that's when it begins on, for 8 weeks from May 1st. If you receive it on May 2nd, it starts 8 weeks after May 2nd. So it's always going by the date that you receive the funds, not the date that you applied for the loan. It's the date that you received the funds.
So there is another question that if someone has scheduled bonuses at the end of period, can they include those bonuses?
They include the bonuses, but the bonuses most likely will be prorated for the 8-week period, not for the entire year.
And how about the housing allowance and other benefits that they give?
That would be included in compensation, so that should make it into the payroll as a payroll expense.
And will the NAIT loan pupil centers, they get loan from NAIT, Alhamdulillah, NAIT sanction loans to many Islamic centers for different projects. So people have questioned that should the NAIT loan be considered for the PPP?
No, the loan, that's a private loan that cannot be, it's not part of the PPP, and therefore it could not be used.
People, they want to know, okay, how to calculate the PPP loan forgiveness.
Well, when you applied for the loan, you took the average average payroll for the year, and you divided by 12, and then you multiply that by 2.5, which would to allow for some expenses for rental or utilities or whatever. Basically, as long as you can be consistent in the way that you use those funds, meaning that the funds will be used for the payroll, and they will constitute 75% of the loan proceeds, you should be able to get the forgiveness. But as I said, the documentation becomes very necessary.
Okay, there was another question that some schools, they end up their payroll in May and then restart in August. A similar question came in when Islamic Center, they pay annual payments in 10 payments or 12 payments. So whoever the employee, they have the option to accept 10 payments or 12 payments. The annual contract amount doesn't change. So what is?
Yeah, well, it needs to be, whenever you have those kind of, especially schools, they do that because the teachers are not working for 2 months, and therefore they pay them over 10 months versus a 12. You take the calculation for the year, you multiply by, since it's 10 months, it's called the seasonal, even though it's only 2 months off, it would fall under the seasonal aspect of it. And you can take the amount, the average of the 10 months, and as long as you pay it, say if you have a payment that's due in July, I would expedite it to make sure it's in June, so that it would fall into that 8 weeks, and then submit it. And a 90% chance that I think should be forgiven. At least you made an attempt to make sure that it's forgiven, and if they disqualify it, that's something that which will be up to them. But most likely it will be forgiven.
How about the mortgage payments?
The mortgage payments are, since they are due and they have to be paid, they are part of that 25% extra that the PP loan gives you in order to pay. So you can either pay interest, a mortgage interest, or mortgage payments, rental payments, all of that can be paid.
And And does utilities include in the PPP program?
Yes, utilities are also included in the PPP. It's under the 25% rule.
And how about the security?
Security for what?
Security for the center.
Security expense. Yeah, that would be considered utilities anyhow.
Yes. So, yeah. How about the worker comp and general liability payments? Are they qualified?
They also qualify. I would include workman's comp as part of probably the payroll, even though there is no guidance on this issue. But I think it's always been considered a payroll expense.
And which payroll taxes are included?
The payroll taxes, yes, payroll taxes, state payroll taxes, unemployment taxes, any taxes that the employer pays for the benefit of the employee, yes, but not the withholdings, not the withholdings. So do not confuse that.
You have mentioned that the people have to be back on payroll by June 30. However, the 8-week period would have expired by then. How does this work?
Well, to be honest with you, the guidance on that one is I mean, they're basically saying that if you somehow they rehire the employees by June 30th, they will somehow give you an allowance for his compensation. How does that work? I'm not sure about that exactly, but I can, that's something that needs to be explored a little bit further.
Okay, I believe most of the questions were answered in a good way. And inshallah, we are here at North American Islamic Trust to answer all of your questions. You can call us at 630-789-9191. Brother Salah Obeidallah is here, and Brother Azam Nizamuddin, General Counsel, he's also here. So we can answer all of your questions, inshallah.
Well, I just need to also, have a disclaimer. Basically, the advice that I have here, or at least the talk that I've just gave, is not in any way constitute a legal advice or something that you can totally rely on. I would ask you to check with your legal team or with your accountants to make sure that you do the right thing. We tried here at NAIT to try to simplify the process. We were the first one to explain the PPP and send out to our centers to make sure that they apply and make sure that they do the right thing. And this is part of our continuing effort to explain and simplify the process in hope that it will be beneficial to our centers. If you need us, please feel free to call us at 630-789-9191. We also have a presentation over here, or a PowerPoint presentation that we can send to you. So if you send us at info@nait.net, info@nait.net, we will forward this presentation to you, inshallah, and hopefully it will be beneficial, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Brother Salah Obeidallah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Jazakumullah khairan, and may Allah bless you in this holy month of Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.